Ginger, black pepper, turmeric. It's got a hold on me. Hello, dudes, dudettes, duders, and everyone in between, and welcome to How to Do Everything So You Don't Have to, a series where we teach you how to think like a producer. It's been about a year since MidJourney and ChatGPT saw mass adoption, and once the gates were open, pretty much every corner of our lives was enhanced with AI. The models themselves were surprising enough in their ability to not only understand artistic intent, but also their ability to deliver competence more often than not, and even, occasionally, deliver something that could be considered good. Even more surprising than the viability of the tool sets was the public reaction. Typically, large technological shifts like this are met with enthusiasm, like when AOL made the internet easy to access and understand, or when Facebook and Twitter pinned down the model of what social media could be. When these advancements aren't met with excitement, there's usually at least mild curiosity or light ribbing, like when virtual reality hit its stride in the early 90s, or perhaps when virtual reality hit its stride in the mid-10s, or perhaps when virtual reality hit its stride in the early 20s. Artificial intelligence and large language models represent some of the most incredible advancements in technology that we have seen in the last century, perhaps in the history of our species, promising to reshape how we interact with every piece of technology that exists and to give way to technologies that were previously impossible. And the general response seems to have been a collective, get this out of my face right now. It's been a bit of a whirlwind, so I thought it was a good time to look back on the last year of advancements, discuss what we have to look forward to in the future, and see if we can square all of that with the understandably dim view people seem to have of the technology. Now, when I say that people have a dim view of AI, I'm mostly talking about human people, not corporation people. Corporation people seem to be much more enthusiastic, and I think that's part of the problem. The most advertised promise of AI is the facility with which you can execute tasks that used to require half a lifetime of training. For example, if I wanted an oil painting of the biggest dum-dum to ever do it, I'd have to spend years learning how to paint, developing my own style, and then figuring out what the phrase biggest dum-dum to ever do it meant to me. MidJourney can deliver results in 30 seconds. I mean, look at that big dum-dum. What a maroon! It's completely understandable how a piece of software that can generate a simulacrum of art so efficiently could be perceived as a threat to people who built their lives and careers around creating art. I'm not trying to dismiss that dynamic, but I would like to take a moment to examine two things that seem to be true about AI. The first is how it integrates into daily life, and the second is how it affects the business of art and creative consulting. First, let's look at the human component. I feel like the amount AI functions without human involvement is a bit exaggerated. This is not to say that there's no truth to the concerns. There is certainly a black box thing going on here. You input your query, and then LLMs work their alchemy without supervision or feedback from the user. Furthermore, if you were to print the entirety of the code that governs these algorithms out, there isn't a human alive who could read it and understand how all of the pieces fit together. So, the sense that there is a core to AI and LLMs that is simply impossible for humans to access or understand is completely rational. But that doesn't mean that the models exist or do anything at all in the absence of man. There are 5 stages to any use of AI, and what you'll find is that the human component dominates the majority of them. In the first phase, humans build the AI models that we use. In the second, a human queries the software, requesting an image or a block of text or directions to San Diego Comic-Con, whatever it is. In phase 3, the computer churns and returns a result. In the fourth phase, the human user assesses the result. And finally, in phase 5, they either integrate the result into a larger project or they throw it in the trash. What I want to stress here is that only one phase of the entire process exists in the absence of man. There's only one point in the entire pipeline in which the robots take over. Robots only exist right here. When you keep that in mind, you can understand why I'm not yet convinced that humans are being extracted from the workflow in a way that is disproportionate to anything else we've seen since the start of the Industrial Revolution. The big difference seems to be that we've been seeing the steady automation of mechanical processes for the last century. With AI, we're starting to see the automation of creative and intellectual processes. That leads to the legitimate concern that creative jobs are threatened by the advancement of these technologies. Again, I'm not convinced that the threat is at the scale that people seem to assume. As LLMs were able to function with increasing speed and accuracy over the last year, I spent a lot of time thinking about what my job actually was as a producer. What I realized was that all projects had three things in common, and what they all had in common was impossible to replace with an algorithm. The first thing that was a given on every commission we'd received was that the piece being commissioned didn't exist. This might sound so mundane as to not require comment, but it's one of the most important components of a paid job. In order for someone to hire you to create a thing, that thing has to not yet exist. If it already existed, they just use the thing that exists. LLMs don't seem to create anything so much as mash all the things that already exist together and deliver the average. To date, we have never had a paying client call us to ask if we could mash everything that already exists together and then publish whatever comes out the other side. Even the most precise AI results have been too vague and broad-stroke to release as a final product. While we have seen improvements in resolution for images and intellectual coherence in text, the middling nature of everything that AI delivers hasn't improved that much in the last year. It's higher resolution nonsense from what we were seeing at the end of 2023, but it's still nonsense. The second criterion is that the media we create was commissioned by a member of a community and functioned to communicate some kind of message to other members within that community. Whether it was a recap of an event we filmed or a curated presser for a tech company, everything was built around a human being who had something of importance to communicate to other human beings. The reality is that you cannot replace human communities with bots. Communities congregate around what delights or disgusts them, what they'd like to see more of or less of. A good example of this is political parties. Value can be created by congregating around an ideal and sending a unified message to elected representatives. There's no value in congregating and sending that message to an LLM. Just as there's no value in having one person commission an LLM to generate thousands of letters and sending them to a politician. I do believe that it's possible to simulate value in such a manner. You could probably trick a politician or two into behaving a certain way by having bots reach out to their office, effectively creating the appearance of a lot of people caring about a single issue. But I don't see that as a long-term business model, just as a way to get what you want once or twice before actual communities get wise and adapt. The third criterion is that the commissioning party wanted to make something. Again, such a simple concept that it shouldn't warrant mention, but there's a very important nuance to this that must be understood. Our clients have never wanted something made for them. They wanted to make something and they needed support in executing that vision. Every single person who's ever hired us wanted to be a part of the fun. And no wonder, it's super fun to make things together. You remember that middle step where the AI churns and returns a result? I believe that the black box is a greater liability to AI than people are assuming. Our clients and our teams are all on board because they want to be involved in the creation of something new and meaningful. That doesn't happen here, that happens here. You get it? Well then, what's the big threat? The big threat we see with AI isn't a drain on the available work, but a drain on the available talent. Hear me out. The damage being done is in the middle of the training bell curve. It's easy to be a beginner because you just jump in as ignorant as everyone else who's ever tried it. It's easy to be an expert because you have a deep knowledge base and you can bring terrific value to communities by knowing how to apply that knowledge base. Crossing that gap from being the biggest dum-dum to ever do it to being an expert involves a lot of trial and error, a lot of mediocrity, and a lot of embarrassing blunders. If a workforce can skip the trial and error, the mediocrity, and the embarrassment, there are diminished opportunities to push through to true excellence in a field. Mediocrity is what you achieve before you can have a shot at greatness, and it takes thousands of hours to nail down. Those thousands of hours would be painful, save for the fact that they're spent with others who are also pushing through failures, embarrassment, and mediocrity. Scars like those are painful in isolation, but delightful when earned within a community. But you earn your scar tissue. You can't generate scar tissue with an LLM. Look, the jobs will continue to exist. The need to speak new ideas will persist. The need to communicate within communities will be present as long as our species is alive. A desire to engage with a creative process will continue to be the reason that people hire us. The pool of people who help us with those projects is what is threatened by AI. The only way to get good at something is by doing it. You cannot hypothesize your way into a great piece of art. From our perspective, the tools are 10% useful in the brainstorming phase and 90% benign in every other aspect of production. So, why is there so much antipathy towards the models? Well, let's take it back to the excitement felt around the advent of social media. If you were there as Facebook made its transition from college networking site to global phenomenon, you will recall that it was pretty exciting. The promise of a platform that would allow you to reconnect with old friends and distant family members was intoxicating at the time. There had been platforms that allowed for this to happen before, but none had been deployed with the precision or the reach of Facebook. Over the last 2 decades, we've seen social media mature into its practical and functional form, but we've also become aware of the cost it's had in terms of actual connection and our ability to communicate. Every family has its members that got lost down a social media rabbit hole, and those stories are painful. We hear them all the time on production, and that weight is doubly felt around the holidays. I do not believe that our species collectively enjoys fragmented reality as we're currently experiencing it, and I also believe that there is an awareness of technology's blame in this fragmentation. If we're collectively a little gun-shy after the damage social media has done to the fabric of our communities, it means that we're still a healthy society prone towards a desire to survive. AI being met with a collective, get this out of my face right now, is the appropriate response to any new technology with such broad implications. The compulsion to survive is at the core of our DNA, as is the compulsion to create beautiful things. If you consider survival to be beautiful, you might have trouble untangling the idea of survival from the idea of art. I know that I do, because the process of creating art is a process of perceiving the world, untangling its complexities, and translating them to something compelling. Every piece of art brings value to the folks involved in its creation long before it brings value to any audience. We are compelled as a species to make sense of the world around us. As long as the world is confusing, there will be a compulsion to untangle that information. As long as there is information to untangle, there will be value that you as an artist can bring to your community. The amount of value we bring is directly tethered to the amount of mediocrity we are able to cure so that we can be excellent at our craft. With that in mind, I'd like to say a sincere Happy New Year and express the marrow-level excitement I'm feeling about the possibilities of creation we can look forward to in the new year. Thank you for considering these ideas and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Now please, turn off YouTube and go create beautiful things with your friends, even if they are mediocre. Especially if they are mediocre.